How could a young woman, who loved her child and had no enemies, be brutally murdered in her own apartment? How could a father, who once called her the mother of my child, shoot her 12 times, take her life, and then attend the funeral, sitting silently among the victim's family as if he were grieving too? This was more than just murder, it was a deep cut into trust, or betrayal was hidden behind fake tears. On the afternoon of February 9, 2024, in Baldwin, Pennsylvania, police responded to a call about a child left alone. When they entered the apartment, they found a 1-year-old girl sitting quietly in the room next to the body of her mother, 20-year-old Ramia Remy Griffin, shot 12 times. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no screaming. There was only dead silence and a big question: who could have done this? The answer stunned the community. The suspect was Adelin Itanwa, 22 years old, the ex-boyfriend and father of the child. He not only killed Remy, but also appeared at the funeral, pretending to mourn, hugging her relatives, as if he were also a victim. In today's video, we will uncover the secret behind the Ramia Griffin case, a case that not only broke hearts but also made people ask the question: do we really know the people living next to us? If you are interested in true stories that expose the dark side of human psychology, subscribe to the channel now. Your support is the motivation for us to continue telling the truths that need to be heard. Ramia Remy Griffin is the embodiment of a young mother with all the sacrifice and resilience that being 20 can bring. Born and raised in Estoril, Pennsylvania, Remy didn't stand out from the crowd, but those who met her remember her warm eyes, soft voice, and smile that was always there even on the toughest days. As a single mother of a 1-year-old girl, Remy poured her entire life into her child. She raised her with dedication and care. Every meal, every nap, every tiny shirt was a testament to that unconditional love. Remy never had the opportunity to go to college, but she always talked about her dream of becoming a nurse or working in childcare. Whenever friends asked, she just smiled and said, "When my baby can walk, I'll go back to school." For her, her daughter is a reason to strive, a motivation to build a better future, even though her current life is still lacking. She lives simply, avoids conflict and always keeps her private life, to the point that neighbors sometimes say Remy lives in a world of mother and daughter. But that makes people feel even more heartbroken when they know that in that world, there is a hidden danger that no one knows about. Adelin Itanwa, the child's father and Remy's ex-boyfriend, was a part of her life throughout high school. They were passionately in love, dreamed of a family, until reality, petty arguments, and the pressure of raising a child caused their relationship to crack. Although they broke up after their daughter was born, the two tried to maintain a cooperative attitude to take care of the child together, a peaceful agreement that Remy's family always tried to believe in. But according to Remy's sister, Mariah, Adelin always carried an uneasy air about him. He never raised his voice, never acted rudely, but was so quiet, as if he was hiding something. He was like a shadow, never really there, but he always made me shiver, Mariah said. Though there was no physical violence, there were warning signs, cold eyes, quiet possessiveness, and reluctance to talk about custody. But they were ignored, because he was the father, and because Remy still hoped that one day they could raise their daughter together in peace. Unfortunately, that hope was what led to her most tragic end. At around 3 a.m. on February 9, Adelin was caught on security cameras leaving her apartment complex. Outside, Baldwin was eerily quiet. The yellow streetlights cast mottled shadows on the brick walls of the old apartment complex. Inside the second-floor apartment, the digital clock on the kitchen counter blinked 2:59 a.m. Ramia Remy Griffin had just finished rocking her little daughter to sleep. The child turned slightly, her arms tightly wrapped around a small blanket, her breathing even in the dark. Remy gently closed the door and walked out into the living room. Little did she know that, in just a few seconds, everything in her life would suddenly stop. A knock sounded on the door, soft, steady, patient. Remy paused. Her heart skipped a beat. Who would be coming at this hour? She stepped closer, peeking through the crack in the door. It was Adelin, her daughter's father. He bowed his head, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his black hoodie. His face was half in shadow, but his eyes, they weren't what they usually were. Adelin? Remy opened the door a crack, her voice tinged with surprise. What's wrong? He raised his head. I need to talk. She hesitated, then nodded slightly and turned to enter. The door was unlocked. At that moment, the gun was drawn, as fast as a practiced reflex. Before Remy could turn around, the first shot rang out, tearing through the quiet space. The bullet was lodged in her chest. Remy was stunned, instinctively retreating, her eyes wide with horror. The second shot rang out, her shoulder was pierced. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, red beginning to stain the cold wood. In a panic, Remy crawled toward the door of her child's room, her eyes pleading for help and determined to survive. But Adelin slowly approached. He didn't say anything. The arm holding the gun was still as steady as rock. The third, fourth, and fifth bullets were pulled in succession, into the stomach, into the thigh, into the ribs. Each shot was a rejection of humanity, a killing of the memory of a past relationship. Remy, despite the pain, still tried to reach out towards the closed door where her daughter slept. An indistinct whisper fell from her lips, a plea, a final call. Adelin stopped in the middle of the hallway. His eyes stared lifelessly at the woman before him, the one who had once held him, had once called him the father of my child. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger 3 more times. Remy's head drooped, his eyes lost focus. In the next few seconds, the space fell into a terrifying silence. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the heavy scent of blood in the air. The cold floor was now covered in a pool of red. And then, the girl's cries rang out, weak but persistent, from the other room. Adelin looked at the door. He did not open it. No check. No hug. He turned away, walked out of the apartment as if nothing had happened. Behind him, the little girl continued to cry, no one answered. Her mother, who had been her whole world, was now just a motionless figure on the cold floor, forever silent. Lieutenant Daniel Moore had more than 15 years of experience in the field, but on the afternoon of February 9, 2024, when he walked into apartment number 12, Youngridge Drive, he sensed something was off. The initial call had been about a child left alone. But one glance at the front door, ajar, unbroken, put Moore on alert. There was no sign of forced entry. And that could only mean one thing: someone had been invited in. When he stepped into the room, it was quiet inside. The kitchen light was on, a half-finished glass on the table. The furniture was neat. There was no sign of disturbance or robbery. But just a few steps later, Moore saw blood staining from the bedroom into the hallway. He signaled his teammates to keep their distance, drew his gun, and stepped in. As the officers entered the bedroom, their steps in a combat stance, the scene before them was horrifying. The body of a young woman, later identified as Ramia Remy Griffin, lay motionless on the wooden floor. She was riddled with bullet holes, at least a dozen. There was no sign of a struggle or defense. She had been attacked suddenly, at close range. Shell casings were scattered around her, each one marking the cold-blooded pull of the trigger. Then Moore heard a noise, a small, trembling cry. He opened the door to the next room and saw a little girl, about a year old, sitting in her crib, distraught but unharmed. She didn't cry loudly when he picked her up, she just clung to his shoulder, shaking. Looking back at the scene, Moore had only one clear conclusion: there had been no break-in, no disturbance, which meant the victim knew who had killed her. And with the child as the only living witness, the case was no longer a random murder, but a betrayal by someone closest to her. From the moment the body of Ramia Remy Griffin was discovered, investigators knew this was no random attack. There were no signs of forced entry, no furniture was disturbed, the victim knew the killer. And like a tense game of chess, every move the police made had to be calculated, every piece of the puzzle had to be assembled precisely to reveal the full picture of the crime. The starting point of the investigation was the shell casings scattered on the floor. The gun had not been found, but the .40 caliber bullets were determined to be from a popular semi-automatic, information that could be traced back to firearms registration records. But in the age of technology, the police knew they needed a quicker, more direct clue: security cameras. Remy's apartment had no cameras inside, but there were in the parking lot outside and the building's hallways. When the video footage was extracted, a crucial discovery emerged. At approximately 2:52 a.m. on February 9, a man in a dark hoodie entered the apartment complex. The camera recorded him walking straight to Remy's apartment, without looking around, without hesitation. At 3:11 a.m., the figure appeared again, this time leaving. He walked faster, his hands still in his pockets, his face in shadow. The image was unclear, but the police began to compare height, body shape, and even the way he walked. Each step was analyzed like a code-breaking game. At the same time, they began to reach out to the neighbors. Several witnesses said they had heard a soft knock like a knock on the door around 3 a.m., but did not think it was anything serious. A woman who lived downstairs remembered hearing a baby crying for a long time in the early morning, but she didn't go up to check because she thought the parents were asleep. The unusual silence, no screaming or arguing, led to the police. Remy had been attacked by surprise, with no chance to fight back. At the same time, they began to reach out to the neighbors. Several witnesses said they had heard a soft knock like a knock on the door around 3 a.m., but did not think it was anything serious. A woman who lived downstairs remembered hearing a baby crying for a long time in the early morning, but she didn't go up to check because she thought the parents were asleep. The unusual silence, no screaming or arguing, led to the police. Remy had been attacked by surprise, with no chance to fight back. Another lead opened up when the police retrieved Remy's phone data. The last text message was sent at 10:37 p.m. the night before, to a close friend. The content was simple: "I'm fine, the baby's asleep. Call me tomorrow." Nothing unusual, but her phone suddenly went offline at around 3:15 a.m., the same time as the video of the man leaving the apartment. With this data, the police asked for information from the carriers to determine which devices had been nearby around the time of the incident. And then, the name Adelin Itonwa popped up. His phone was recorded at a cell tower near Remy's apartment complex at the exact time of the incident. What's more, GPS data showed that Adelin's phone traveled from Monroeville to Baldwin Borough on the night of February 8, and returned shortly after 3 a.m. on February 9. The circumstantial evidence began to pile up. Adelin had no criminal record, but was reported to have verbally abused Remy during an argument at the medical center where they took their son. Although he was not charged, it was a significant sign. In addition, Remy's sister, Mariah, said that in recent weeks, Remy had been tired and anxious whenever Adeline was mentioned. She wouldn't elaborate, saying only, "He's weird, I don't want to argue, but I'm tired." And then, the element that really stunned the entire investigation team, the funeral. At Remy's funeral, a crowd of family and friends came to pay their respects. Among the crowd, Adeline appeared. He was neatly dressed in black, his face bowed, occasionally wiping away tears. He hugged Remy's mother, whispering something she couldn't remember because she was so heartbroken. No one suspected. He played the role of the bereaved father to we. But as the evidence began to pile up, camera footage, phone signals, unusual behavior, a portrait of him emerged. A cold, calculating killer, and sane enough to sit through his own funeral as if nothing had happened. The police knew they were on the right track. But like in a mind game, every step they took, every piece of information they pieced together, had to be precise, because they were dealing with someone who was not only capable of murder, but also of hiding his crimes behind a mask of grief. And it was that lie that, in the end, became the most powerful evidence of guilt. So, what was the motive behind Remy Griffin's death? While it has not been officially announced, the details of the investigation are slowly being revealed, and they all point to a familiar theme in intimate relationship murders: control, jealousy, and simmering conflict that no one noticed. Remy and Adeline Itanwa were a high school couple who had a daughter together. They stayed in touch after their split to raise their child together, but their relationship was not as healthy as it seemed. Remy's family said she avoided mentioning Adeline, and whenever he appeared, she seemed visibly stressed. Small signs, like an unsent text, a confused look, or the vague "I don't know who to tell," could have been early warning signs of chronic emotional abuse. But they were never taken seriously. In criminology, intimate partner killers rarely act randomly. They are often motivated by a sense of powerlessness, especially when an ex-partner begins to rebuild his or her life. Remy, just 20, is looking to return to school, find a stable job, and devote all his or her attention to his or her child. This may have left Adeline feeling excluded from their lives. For someone with a controlling mindset, this is a rejection, a betrayal, unacceptable. Police also suspect a conflict over child custody. Silent disagreements over visitation schedules, schooling, or childcare may have been the spark that led to extreme behavior. In Adeline's eyes, losing control of her child meant losing everything. The case is not only a family tragedy, but also a warning: post-breakup conflicts, if not recognized and intervened, can lead to irreversible consequences. And Remy, despite his efforts to maintain peace for his children, could not escape the toxic shadow of the PA. On February 10, 2024, Monroeville was gray, the clouds were low, the air was thick. In a quiet suburban alley, where no one expected it, a group of plainclothes police officers quietly approached the ash-gray house, Adeline Itanwa's supposed hiding place. He had no idea that his every move had been monitored for the past 24 hours. After security cameras recorded him leaving Remy's apartment complex at 3 a.m., and phone records confirmed that he was the last person to have contact with the victim, all the clues pointed to him. The investigators knew that if they didn't act quickly, he would disappear, and this time, maybe forever. In the back room, Adeline sat by the window, looking out into the backyard as if waiting for something. No luggage, no signs of preparation to move, but his eyes were suspiciously alert. He knew things were closing in. He didn't rush out of town, didn't change his phone, didn't cut off contact, an unusual evasion strategy that made the police wary. Sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the one who runs, but the one who stands still, biding his time. 9:17 a.m. The door swung open. "Police! Don't move!" A shout broke the silence. Adeline stood up, raised his hands, and didn't resist. Not a word. Not a reaction. His face showed no emotion, which was what made the investigators so nervous. It wasn't surprise, it wasn't panic, it was deliberate resignation. It was as if he'd been waiting for this moment. He was handcuffed and escorted to the car. As he passed through the iron gate, several neighbors watched in shock. They couldn't believe that the man who had held the baby at the funeral, shedding tears over his mother's casket, was the same man who had taken her life, cold and deliberate. Adeline was taken to the Allegheny County Jail that same day. The district attorney's office made it clear: no bail. No exceptions. First-degree murder and child endangerment will be pursued to the fullest extent. From that moment on, he was no longer a free man. He was the prime suspect in one of the coldest and most heartbreaking cases the city had ever seen. And in that prison, behind bars, begins awaiting, not to escape, but to face the truth. Justice is coming, step by step. On March 16, 2025, at the Allegheny County Courthouse, the trial of Adeline Etanwa officially began in a heavy, intense atmosphere. Inside the Allegheny County Courthouse courtroom, the air was so thick it seemed almost touchable. The white light from the ceiling lights reflected on the benches where the judges, prosecutors, and the victim's family sat silently. Every eye turned to the dock, where Adeline Etanwa, charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment, entered in an orange prison uniform, her head bowed low, her shoulders shaking slightly as if weighed down by the weight of her crime. The chief judge banged his gavel to declare the trial open. The prosecutor stood up, his voice echoing through the room like a sharp knife, listing the evidence: the surveillance video, the time of the phone call that matched the time of Remy's murder, the bloodstains, the bullet marks, the forensic data. Each detail was like a slash into the silence, stirring waves of emotion in the courtroom, especially from the victim's family. Mariah, Remy's sister, squeezed her mother's hand. The two women's faces were quiet but strong, as if they were trying not to break down before the man who had sat between them at the funeral, now bowing his head and confessing. When Adeline spoke, his voice was hoarse, almost a breath: "I plead guilty." There was no excuse, no return glance. In that moment, the entire room fell into a suffocating silence. After more than 2 hours of presentation and trial, the jury rose to announce the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The hammer fell as if to extinguish any possibility of redemption. Adeline was handcuffed and let out without a single glance back, as if he himself wanted to escape the eyes of everyone. Outside the courthouse, the crowd still stood waiting, not cheering, not angry. They were silent, the way they had been silent since Remy left. But for the Griffin family, that silence was not the end. They knew that justice did not stop at the sentence, but also about ensuring that the 1-year-old girl lived in love, and did not have to witness another night of terror. And today, in the cold light of justice, they began that journey, a journey to preserve the last good thing Remy left behind. The case of Remy Griffin forces us to face a cold, long-ignored truth: not all killers come from the shadows. Sometimes, it is those who once promised to love and protect who become the greatest threat. In the eyes of the community, Adeline Etanwa was a young father, an ex-boyfriend trying to maintain a peaceful relationship to raise their child. But behind that calm exterior was a heart that was gradually rotting from control, possessiveness, and jealousy that had been suppressed for too long. This case is not just a family tragedy, but a mirror reflecting invisible dangers, especially mental violence in relationships. Unlike the obvious physical wounds, mental violence is a slow-burning poison that penetrates the victim's consciousness through manipulative words, hidden control, and gradual isolation from friends and relatives. Remy, like many other victims, may have felt something was wrong, but the silence, the concealment because she wanted her daughter to have a father, pushed her to the limit where she had no chance of returning. What is frightening is that society still has very little ability to recognize and prevent this type of violence. Neighbors hear crying, but no one knocks on the door. Friends feel something is wrong, but do not say anything. Families notice that he is shady, but lack concrete evidence. That hesitation, sometimes stemming from the thought that it is none of my business, is the deadly gap in which the perpetrator can hide and strike. The lesson here is not only for those involved, but for the entire community: no one should be silent in the face of danger. A timely question, a call, a word of sharing can save a life, sometimes the life of the person right next to us. Remy is gone, and her daughter will grow up without the figure of a mother. But Remy's story, and the sentence handed down to the killer, must be remembered as a warning. It is not only a journey to reclaim justice, but also a testament to the need to listen, pay attention and speak up. In the complex world of relationships, the kindest thing is sometimes to be vigilant. Remy was a young mother, a gentle daughter, an unfinished dream. She did not deserve to die. And if this society wants to prevent another Remy from having her future robbed, then we each of us must be the first to speak up. Not out of curiosity, but out of humanity. Not out of responsibility, but because we do not want to have regrets again. When the person who cries at a funeral is the one who murdered the victim, it is not just a crime, it is the horrifying embodiment of hypocrisy to the extreme. It is a second, deeper, quieter stab into the hearts of those who grieve, unaware that they are embracing the one who took their loved one. Remy Griffin was brutally taken from her life, but what she is remembered for is not the tragedy. Remy is a symbol of the strength of a young mother, always trying to keep her child safe despite the storms in her heart. She lived simply, loved sincerely, and believed in the goodness of others, even her daughter's father. Her death was not the end, but the echo that awakened an entire community. She left behind not only a baby girl, but also a reminder that the truth sometimes lies behind a fake smile, and that justice, not only in the judgment of the court, but also in the sober eyes of those who asked the right questions. Remy deserves to be remembered, not for her death, but for all that she lived, the love, the faith, and the quiet strength that too many people do not see until it is too late. And from here on, each of us, whether we are just a neighbor, a friend, or a passerby, bears the responsibility to keep tragedies like Remy's from happening again. That is the only way to keep the pain from being in vain.